You'd never bow down to a golden calf, but how many times have you turned to AI before you turn to God? In today's video, we're going to talk about AI and how many people are deifying it. They are putting it on the same level as God. And many of these people are atheists to begin with, so they don't believe in a God, but they believe that they're able to create something on the same level as God. I'm going to talk some about how that's not going to happen, that AI is not going to supersede humans and become this godlike tool. But we are also going to talk about how just that entire idea is an ancient one, that people have been trying to make gods that are not the true God for thousands of years. So you might be wondering what puts me in a position to be able to talk about this. Well, I have a PhD in mechanical engineering. I'm a robotics engineer, and I've been working with AI long before it became this popular thing that the public is able to work with. So my PhD research was with robotics, where I was using AI to create walking controllers for simulated bipeds. So I had these humanoid robots, and I would just make them fall over and over again as they learn to be balanced and stable. So that idea of AI is just one segment of it. But what you probably are familiar with is something like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or one of these various AI tools that you can almost ask it things like an oracle, almost like a god, and it can tell you, it can give you an answer based on the entirety of the internet. But the thing about this is it's trained on the internet, which means it's trained on human knowledge. It's trained on human data and language. So it's not that it actually understands anything. It's not actually thinking, no matter what they tell you, it's not actually intelligent. It's just an artificial intelligence where it's taking our human ideas and putting them together to give you an answer that's useful. So I want to talk about some scripture here. There are many times in the Old Testament, particularly, where you see people bowing down to and worshiping and creating idols. And one of the most egregious examples of this is with the children of Israel, who should have been following the true God. If you look at their journey, they are slaves at the beginning of the book of Exodus. But by the time you get to Exodus chapter 20 and they are out there at Mount Sinai, God is giving them the Ten Commandments. And the first four of the Ten Commandments are commandments that are related to the Israelites' relationship with God. So those commandments, again, are given in Exodus chapter 20. And the scripture begins with God saying to them, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. God freed them from slavery. And so he begins to give the Ten Commandments. Here are the first three. The first one is, you shall have no other gods before me. The second one is, you shall not make to yourselves any graven images, not anything on the ground, in the sea, or in the air. Then the third commandment is, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And the fourth commandment is, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But I want you to keep in mind those first three, because when we fast forward to Exodus chapter 32, at this point, Moses is up on the mountain. The people were so afraid of God there in Exodus chapters 19 and 20 that they said to Moses, you go talk to God, we're afraid. So Moses goes up there, he talks to God, and God gives him the Ten Commandments. And in chapter 32, God has been there talking to Moses on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And the Israelites start getting a little antsy. The scripture says, beginning in verse 1, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. Now Aaron proceeds to tell them, hey, give me your gold, give me the gold earrings that are in your ears. And the people break off their gold, they give it to Aaron, and he fashions it into a golden calf. And this golden calf is something that the Israelites then say, this is your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. I want you to think about that for a second. They made this calf and then said it was the God that brought them out of Egypt. They just made it. And so they're saying that this is the same God that got them out of Egypt. You understand how foolish this is? Now we read this and say, oh, that's, of course, these ancient people, they were just so stupid. We make AI, and then people turn around and want to say that it is a God or that it can become a God. but we just made it. We made it out of, again, our human language. This is a computer program that we're using here that has these large language models, and I get that. But these are things that we made. To then turn around and call it a God is just as ridiculous as what these people are doing with the golden calf. Now, you might be thinking, oh, there's nobody that actually thinks that AI is a God. There's something called the Church of AI. And I might put like something about it on the screen here. There's something called the Church of AI already, where there are people that are saying this is going to become godlike, and they're willing to do this. This is the foolishness that mankind gets into. Now, God is with Moses on the mountain, and God says to him here in Exodus chapter 32, you need to get back down the mountain because these people are making themselves a golden calf. They made themselves a molded calf, and they're worshiping it. Now, this is a violation of the first three commandments. I always knew it was a violation of the first two, but I didn't think about how it was a violation of the third one until recently. So, of course, they just made this graven image. So the most obvious way that they broke the second commandment is that they made a golden image, a golden idol. But they broke the first one too, because really they're putting this thing that they are calling God, because they said here in Exodus chapter 32, verse 4, this is your God who brought you out of Egypt. So they're putting this above the true God. But they also break the third commandment too, because the third commandment says, do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. If you look in verse 5, after the Israelites say, this golden calf is your God, Aaron says in Exodus chapter 32, verse 5, it said, the scripture says, so when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. Now, whenever you see the Lord in all caps, that is the covenant name of God, Yahweh. So Aaron is saying here, tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh. Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Who are they offering these burnt offerings and peace offerings to? Aaron says Yahweh, but it's to this golden calf. They are taking the name of Yahweh in vain. To put his name along with a golden calf is taking his name in vain. So they're breaking the first three of the 10 commandments. And I was talking about this in a class the other day, and someone pointed out, well, the people didn't have the 10 commandments in written form yet. And that's true. They didn't have it in written form. Moses was receiving that on the mountain. But as we just read in Exodus chapter 20, God had already given the people. He had spoken these commandments to the people. So the people knew this. And they had a previous history. Beginning with Abraham, there was no worshiping a golden calf or any kind of idolatry. Abraham's family, his father and others, may have worshipped idols. But from Abraham moving forward, the people of God did not worship these false idols. And so they may have gotten some of this from Egypt when they were slaves, but they knew better than to do this. So God was ready to destroy them. Moses intervened on behalf of the people. But then Moses came down from the mountain. He saw everything that happened, and he was angry. He burned the calf. He ground it up and put it in their water supply for them to drink. So he was mad. He was not as mad when he's up on the mountain because he hadn't seen what had happened yet. When he came down off of the mountain, he got angry too. Now, the point of talking about the golden calf here is that this really is no different than people taking AI, which is a computer program that takes human knowledge and is able to pull together a lot of human knowledge. Admittedly, it's very impressive what it does. But in the end, it's a tool. And it's not to be looked at as a god the way people are tending toward this. Now, the other passage I want to look at just to drive all of this home about AI and how it's just very similar to what we see in ancient times is from the book of Isaiah. It's my favorite passage, Isaiah chapter 44. It's my favorite passage that deals with idolatry because it just describes in such vivid detail how ridiculous it is that someone would create an idol and bow down to it. So one of the things that God says earlier in Isaiah chapter 44, verse 8, he says, have I not told you from that time and declared it? You are my witnesses. Is there a God besides me? Indeed, there is no other rock. I know not one. Those who make an image, all of them are useless. and their precious things shall not profit. They are their own witnesses. They neither see nor know that they may be ashamed. Who would form a god and mold an image that profits him nothing? It's a good question. Who would do that? And the answer is humanity has done it repeatedly throughout history, but it's a foolish thing to do, to make something and then claim that it is God, to make something and claim that it is the same as Yahweh, the true God that made everything. One of the most disrespectful things about idolatry is that you're either taking something that God made and then calling it him, or you're taking something that you made and putting it on the same level as him. Now, if we make a thing and God made us, then again, by extension, the thing that we are calling God is again something that he has made because it's something that came from us whom he has made. I say all that to say, it's just disrespectful. To put something on the same level as God means you're having to put a created thing on the same level as the creator, and that doesn't make any sense. So here in Isaiah chapter 44, he goes on to talk about this person who wants to make an idol out of wood. And so it talks about, beginning in verse 14, that there's this man, and he cuts down cedars for himself, and takes the cypress and the oak. He secures it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a pine, and the rain nourishes it. Then it shall be for a man to burn, for he will take some of it and warm himself. Yes, he kindles it and bakes bread. Indeed, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it a carved image and falls down to it. He burns half of it in the fire. With this half he eats meat. He roasts a roast and is satisfied. He even warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I have seen the fire." And the rest of it he makes into a god, his carved image. He falls down before it and worships it, prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." This is what we see people do throughout the Old Testament, and often the Israelites would fall into this. When you get to the time of Elijah, you have Ahab, who is the king of Israel, and Jezebel, who is the queen of Israel, who are sponsoring, through the government, prophets of Baal and Asherah. And so Asherah is basically this tree goddess, if I remember correctly, and basically it's related to this idea of the wood. And so they are worshiping these false gods and asking those gods that they are creating, these images, to deliver them, but they just made the thing. And here, what Isaiah points out is, you have a man that cuts down a tree, and he takes some of the wood, and he uses it for a fire to warm himself, to cook his meal. But the other half of that same wood that he burned in the fire, he makes into a god and says, "You're my God." Well, half of that tree you just burned in the fire. How can you then turn around and say that this is your God? But that's precisely what people do. And similarly, if we think about AI, we take something that comes from our human knowledge. You know, there's a lot of human knowledge that's just stupid. There's a lot of it that's no good. And yet we'll reject parts of it, or we'll take parts of it and we'll say, well, yeah, that's not anything. But we're taking that same human knowledge and using that to train our artificial intelligence. And so part of it we say, yeah, that's something to reject. And the other part we're now wanting to fashion into a God that we say is going to supersede us. It doesn't make sense. So Isaiah starts to essentially ridicule this person who is burning part of this wood in the fire and then taking the other part of the wood and making it into a god. He says in verse 18 and following, "They do not know nor understand, for he has shut their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot understand. And no one considers in his heart, nor is there knowledge nor understanding to say, I have burned half of it in the fire. Yes, I have also baked bread on its coals. I have roasted meat and eaten it. And shall I make the rest of it an abomination? Shall I fall down before a block of wood?" There's no understanding here. You have someone who doesn't see the folly in burning half of this material and then taking the other half and saying it's a god and saying it's someone to deliver me. You just made that thing, and now you're saying that it's going to deliver you. But this is what people are doing with AI. This term idolatry, I like it a lot. Dr. George Montanez, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but in a podcast I saw last year, he came up with this idea of idolatry, where people are making idols out of AI. And I think it's true. And what we should be doing instead when we're looking at AI is really testing it. This professor, George Montañez, he also came up with this idea called the Berean principle, and it's based on the scriptures from Acts chapter. I'm blanking on. Well, we can actually look it up. It's in the book of Acts, where I believe it's chapter 18, where Paul is coming across the Berean Christians. So it is not 18. It's '17. Yeah. So in Acts 17, the Bible compares the Berean Christians to the Christians of Thessalonica. It says they get to the synagogue of the Jews in Acts chapter 17, verse 10. And in verse 11, the scripture says, these were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness and searched the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. Acts chapter 17, verse 11. And so this idea of the Berean principle that he was saying is, just like the Bereans would hear what Paul said, but they didn't just take it as gospel, even though he was preaching the gospel, they would go back to the scriptures. And the things that he was saying regarding Jesus Christ, they would go back and check them. And then they say, whoa, okay. And they were called more fair-minded than the people in Thessalonica, who might have just taken the word as it was, which again, it was the truth, but the Bereans actually checked after it. And so this professor was saying, what you should do when it comes to AI is check. And even the AIs themselves will kind of tell you, hey, this is something that you should double check. It's not infallible. It's not perfect. And that's true. And so it's never going to be that, by the way. It is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be infallible. It's never going to become godlike. It's going to do some things that are powerful. But just like we don't look at calculators as being godlike or computers as being godlike, we shouldn't see AI as being that way as well. They can do some things that we're not able to do. But even those things that they are doing were created by humans. We made them. And so the idea that we're going to make something that now becomes God is ridiculous.